Howdy, today on Flip Science, we're looking at the circulatory system. So the science understanding we're going to look at, in many animals, the transport and exchange of materials is facilitated by the structure and function of the circulatory system. So the job of the circulatory system is to push blood around the body. Here we're looking at human circulatory system. We'll look at animals and other animals in a second. But its job is to push blood around the body. The blood contains many things. It has red blood cells, which carry oxygen around the body. It contains white blood cells, which are part of the immune system. They help to fight infections. It contains a large amount of plasma, which is about 55% of the total blood. This is water, so that's the watery part of blood. And we'll look at what plasma contains in a second. And there's also these things called platelets. And platelets help your blood to clot so that if you cut yourself, you don't bleed out all over the place. The plasma, the watery part of blood, it contains the soluble substances that your body needs. So it contains proteins, sugars, ions, other nutrients, hormones, and also carbon dioxide. It's frequently mistaken that carbon dioxide dissolves into red blood cells. It doesn't. It floats around in the plasma as bicarbonate ions. The plasma is yellow if you donate blood. Sometimes if you donate enough blood, they'll ask you to donate plasma, and this is what plasma looks like. So we're looking at human circulatory systems mainly, but there's a wide variety of circulatory systems present in animals, both in terms of the structure, open or closed, but also in terms of the hearts and how the hearts are structured, the number of chambers inside there. We'll start with humans and mammals. We have what's called a closed circulatory system. That means it's one big loop. So you have the heart that pumps blood. It travels in one loop to all the cells and then returns back to the heart. So there's one big loop there. Whereas many invertebrates, not all, but most of them, have what's called an open circulatory system. This is where you still have a heart, so it is pumping fluid, the fluid we call hemolymph here, rather than blood. And that hemolymph just goes into a big space, and that big space kind of surrounds and washes over all the cells. And rather than tubes delivering the hemolymph back to the heart, it just kind of wanders back in. So this is called an open circulatory system. Now, you can also have single or double circulatory systems. We have a double circulatory system. So what happens there is you have two loops. So in one loop, blood passes from the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart. There you have gas exchange happening, which is very important. And then you have this other bigger loop, which is where the blood from the heart goes to all the other cells in the body and then returns. So you have a loop that goes to the lungs and then a loop that goes to the rest of the body. In fish, for example, we only have a single circulatory system. So there's a single loop. So the blood from the heart gets pumped to the gills, and then from the gills it goes to the rest of the body. And then it makes its way back to the heart. So there's only one big loop here, whereas in a double circulatory system you have two. Now, there are a variety of heart structures, but we're just going to focus on the human heart. So the human heart has 4 chambers. One side of the heart pumps blood to the lungs, the other side of the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body. The blood coming into the heart is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. That goes to the lungs, and oxygen and carbon dioxide get exchanged, so the blood becomes high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide. The blood then returns back into the heart and then is pumped out to the rest of the body. So let's go through the heart structure now. We're going to follow the blood as it follows its path from the body and then to the lungs and then back to the heart and then back out to the body. So the blood comes into the heart through 2 big veins called the vena cava. One's superior, it comes from the top of the body. One's inferior, it comes from the bottom. Superior means big, on top, good. Inferior means below, down, bad. The blood from the vena cava drains into the right atrium. Now the sides of the heart are the wrong way round if you view it from this direction, but they make sense if you think of your body. So this is the right-hand side if you were lined up against on the board. So this would be the right-hand side of your body from your perspective. From the right atrium, the blood passes through a valve. This valve here is called the tricuspid valve. And it passes into something called the right ventricle. So we have the contraction of the right ventricle. That pushes the blood into the pulmonary artery through the pulmonary valve. And then from the pulmonary artery, the blood goes to the lungs. So at the lungs, we get the gas exchange happening. So oxygen comes into the blood, carbon dioxide comes out. The blood needs to return from the lungs back to the heart, and that happens through pulmonary veins. So these are both linked up to the lungs. So the blood comes from the pulmonary veins and goes into the left atrium, and then passes through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. We haven't talked about why these valves are here. They're here to stop the blood flowing backwards. If the blood flowed backwards, you would have oxygenated blood going back into areas that are deoxygenated, and that could be quite bad. When you hear a heartbeat, what you're hearing is the valves opening and closing more than you are hearing the muscles contract. Finally, the left ventricle contracts. That pushes blood through the aortic valve into the aorta. The aorta is the largest artery in the body. It carries blood to the rest of the body. So whereas the pulmonary artery takes the blood just to the lungs, which isn't too far away. The aorta has to take blood around the entire body, so right to the top of your head and right to the bottom of your feet. So this blood is under very high pressure, and that's why the left ventricle has bigger muscles than the right ventricle has. The blood in the aorta is under so high pressure that if you cut the aorta here, it would spurt about 7 meters in the air if you directed it upwards. So here we have some animations showing the circulation through the heart. So down here we can see the blood passing into the heart. So here we have vena cava, right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary artery, and we have going to the lungs, back from the lungs through the pulmonary veins, so back in through here, from the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, then the left ventricle, then being pumped out through the aorta to the rest of the body. This animation here shows you where the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood goes. Now, key point is the deoxygenated blood isn't blue. It's just a slightly darker red, but in all our diagrams we show it as blue because it's easier to tell the difference between those two. So again, we have the right-hand side of the heart pumping the blood to the lungs, where it gets oxygenated, and then the left-hand side of the heart pumps the blood to the rest of the body. So let's talk about the blood vessel structures. So arteries are the vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Because the blood is under high pressure in arteries, the arteries have a thick muscle on the outside to help contain that pressure. You don't want to burst arteries. If you do, lots of blood leaks out really, really quickly, and that can be very, very dangerous. If we look at the aorta, it starts branching straight away. So when it's branching, that means that blood is passing through smaller arteries to other parts of the body. Now those smaller arteries branch off themselves down to very small arteries called arterioles. Arterioles join into capillaries. So the capillaries go past every single cell in your body. So you have an arteriole end of a capillary, and that carries the blood to the capillaries. The capillaries are leaky, and that means that they can deliver the substances in the blood to every single cell in your body. The capillary's width is only about one red blood cell, so a little bit bigger than one red blood cell, so the blood cells can pass through. This is handy because that means that the blood cells get very close to the rest of your body cells, and that means that they can pass oxygen through. Again, this process happens through diffusion, which we talked about before. So if we look at this diagram over here, we can see we have our alveoli in the lungs, where we get oxygen going into the blood. Then we get to our capillary, and we can have that oxygen being delivered to each cell. But the blood can also pick up the carbon dioxide, which is a waste product from the cells, and deliver that back to the lungs. The other thing about the capillaries is that they are leaky, and that means the blood that they're carrying, fluid can leak out of that blood. That fluid we call tissue fluid when it's leaked out of the capillaries and washes over the cells. So that fluid that comes out, that carries important components of food, but also other components as well. So it carries sugars, amino acids, and fats from the food, but it also carries hormones as well as other important substances to every single cell in the body. The other side of that is that the cells can emit their waste into that tissue fluid. That tissue fluid can then also be collected by capillaries and drains into venules, which are small veins. We're going to talk about veins shortly. It's important that not all the fluid is collected back by the capillary, and we'll have a look at that when we look at the lymphatic system. So those venules, which are in the end of the capillaries, drain back into veins, and the veins get larger and larger the closer you get to the heart. The veins aren't as muscular as arteries because the blood is at low pressure once it's into the veins. There's also valves inside veins to stop blood flowing backwards because the pressure can be quite low. And this can be dangerous. If you sit in the same position for a very long period of time, the blood might not be able to make its way back to your heart and might start pooling in your veins. And that's where you get what we call a thromboid, which is a blood clot that's flowing through your circulatory system. This can be quite bad. Particularly on long plane journeys, they suggest that you stand up and move around a lot to get the blood flowing back through your body. So let's just quickly summarize the difference between those blood vessels. So arteries have thick muscle and they can carry high pressure blood. Arteries branch off into arterioles. Those arterioles branch off into capillaries, which have one cell membrane and are leaky. The capillaries go past every single cell in your body. They deliver substances to cells, but also take back in waste products back into the capillaries, and then they drain into venules. The venules drain back into veins, and then the veins drain back into the heart. So today on Flipping Science, we looked at the circulatory system. That's it for Flipping Science today. See ya.